High Vibe Nation is live. Welcome to the High Vibe Nation, where we have set out to raise the vibration of every human being on the planet. Your hosts on this journey are Sherry Gideons and Pamela Aubrey. So let's join them now in their current interview with a high-vibing individual.
Hello and welcome to the High Vibe Nation, the #1 positive media show focused on raising the vibe of the planet. A space for you to remember the power within you. It's a love revolution. I'm your host, Sherry Gideons, and this is my co-host, Pamela Aubrey.
Welcome, everyone. Such a joy to be with you again this evening and to have our special guest, Blaine Bartlett. Blaine coaches and consults worldwide and has personally delivered training programs to almost 300,000 individuals and has directly impacted over 1 million people. Blaine is the CEO of Avatar Resources, an adjunct professor at Beijing University, founder of the Institute for Compassionate Capitalism, and a member of the Transformational Leadership Council. He sits on the board of directors of the Unstoppable Foundation and the World Business Academy, and as a member of the advisory boards of all the Japan Management Coaching Association and the Asia Coaching and Mentoring Association. In 2012, Blaine was formally invested as a Knight of the Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem Knights of Malta, the world's oldest humanitarian organization. The primary focus of what he does is built upon a foundation that focuses on returning to or regaining the soul of your business. Blaine is a best-selling author of 5 books, including the #1 international bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. We are delighted to have him on the show. Welcome, Blaine, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Patty. Thank you.
So great to have you.
Yes, absolutely.
And as you know, on this show, we love to talk about being high vibe. So tell us what it means to you to be high vibe.
Well, I'll just bring Nicholas Tesla in, or Nikola Tesla in on this one. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Everything vibrates. Everything vibrates. Even the things that you think are not vibrating, they're vibrating. A stone is vibrating. All matter is simply vibration, slowed down far enough that we can visibly discern it. And what that means essentially is when we start looking at just the nature of manifestation, of creation, everything works on a vibratory frequency. And this isn't woo-woo, this isn't new age stuff. It's actually physics. So to the degree that I can match a vibrational structure, and feelings are the vibration of humans. That's how we get in touch with our world, is through an emotional context. We can think about things, but thoughts can have a feeling structure to them. As a matter of fact, they have to have a feeling structure to them in some way, shape, or form. And the higher the vibration, it's not good or bad. It just makes different things possible. So that's what a high vibe nation is about for me. Things that are vibrating at a high frequency tend to have a lot of invitation associated with them.
Love that. You're speaking my language.
Speaking my language too. Yeah, and that's really how the High Vibe Nation came into existence, and the desire to help others raise to that higher vibration in their own lives and live from their best selves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. So start us out, and for those of us who are joining us, let's talk a little bit about your story. And can you share with us a little bit about your childhood and what led you into doing what you do now?
Wow, goodness, my childhood. I grew up on a farm, so I'll just kind of start with that in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Which unfortunately part of that whole home area is burned right now. It's very sad. But I grew up on a farm, and I mentioned the farm as kind of a starting place, not only because that was kind of the birth story, but because nature was one of my best teachers. The seasonality of nature, but also the lessons I learned about what it means to not be attached to form in one sense. That was some of the best teachings I ever got, was just watching form seem to dissolve and then magically appear again in next season. So where that eventually came to, and I didn't think about this at that time, but we get attached to form, I think, too frequently. And that's where we get ourselves into trouble. And this is kind of the migration to the whole notion of the soul of business and whatnot. My early career was in business marketing. Went to the University of Oregon, went to school in Europe, studied international business. And pretty early on, I got a pretty good indoctrination into the toxicity of large organizations. They seem to squeeze the spirit out of people. And it was crazy because people were autonomous individuals full of agency. When they were away from work, they'd come to work, and metaphorically, they'd hang their hat up, they'd punch the clock to start work and then hang around waiting to be told what to do. And agency disappeared. And it's kind of like, and this is part of the function of the Industrial Revolution educational model, was we developed cogs for an industrial wheel. And if you didn't fit in the wheel the right way, there was hell to pay, because you're supposed to fit in the wheel, because that's how the industry moves forward. So that toxicity of squeezing the life, stretched long term, has some pretty dramatic impacts on the health and well-being, not only of the individual but also on society. And I think we're seeing that writ large in a lot of ways today. So that's kind of, I'm going to go down rabbit holes a lot here, guys.
I love it.
So I'm going back to the origin story. I got fascinated by business. I got fascinated by how people did things together collectively or not. And what seemed to make some things work when other things didn't, when they seemed to have the same tools and the same starting point and that sort of stuff. And it kind of came down to a recognition that, when leaders, managers, people were able to access that spirit, or make it accessible, things would seem to thrive. When that started to get closed down, things seemed to just kind of close off. And I got really fascinated with that in my career, just as far as a career option, and started inventing things. Away we went. Yeah, hey, I love it, Joe. I've got you. Let's go find some rabbits. That's perfect. So,
well, I love that. I love that you're bringing up. I apologize. It sounds like there's a little bit of an echo from my end, but just love that you're bringing up this idea that, people become sort of like the cog in the wheel. I mean, my early career was in corporate, and it really felt like literally every day you were just going through like the machine, and you literally were just a part of it. There was really no humanity to it. So I'm curious, how do you start to bring out the soul of a business? What does that really mean, getting to the soul of your business?
Yeah. There's a couple of examples I can speak to there. First of all, every business was founded on an idea at some point in time. I mean, you can go back to the origin story of any company, and there's an idea, and that idea vibrated. And this is, it really did. It had resonance. People got excited about it. People would get up in the morning going, I can't wait to get there. And that's usually the founder and his or her closest associates. They're just, and this is the entrepreneurial zeal. Slip a pizza under the door and just go away. Yeah, they're tapped into that spirit at that point in time. And something very interesting happens in every business in its gestation period, in its life cycle. The mission of the business, the soul of the business, needs to have a business to deliver on, the promise of what that idea is. So a business gets built. And initially, the decisions and all the activities were organized around that soul or that mission coming to life. And then what happens is we start being successful, and we start paying attention to the business of the process. And decisions morph to being made around the viability of the business, the health and well-being of the business. Mm-hmm. And metrics start to take over that are organized around short-term goals. Did we hit our numbers? That sort of stuff. And not too long in terms of time, the mission starts to get covered up. That zeal, that spark starts to dim. So part of the challenge is, how do you find ways to keep that alive? And you have to find, I'm going to, another rabbit hole here. All an organization is, and this is a really important thing to understand, all an organization is a collection of people that are in relationship. That's all any organization is. Now, obviously, they're in relationship with each other, but they're also in relationship with values, with vision, with work process, with goals. They're in relationship with their desk, with their chair. Everything has a relational component to it. And if you're paying attention to the quality of the relationships, you're probably going to be in pretty good health as an organization. One of those key relationships is my relationship to the vision and the origin story of the organization. And if I'm not paying attention to that, I've got a problem. So where this goes to is that, and this is partly the answer to your question, what keeps relationships viable is conversation. That's what keeps a relationship healthy, is conversations. We don't have, when my husband or my wife tugs on my sleeve and says, we've got to talk, they're not talking about the relationship. Basically what they're doing is, the conversation is the relationship. So what kinds of conversations are we having in the organization? When it's moved to a focus on just solely the business, the conversations are organized around metrics, goals and objectives, KPIs, all of those sorts of things. When we're having, those are conversations about what we're doing. We need to have conversations just as frequently, if not more so, about how we're doing in relationship to what we value in terms of what we're delivering. And if you can keep those kinds of conversations alive, it's a 51-49% kind of a mix. You need to have a viable business, but you can't lose that spark. That's where emotional engagement comes from with the employees. Connection and engagement.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that too. And so what do you think is where people need to change in the nature of the organization or the business when it comes to perception as well? Because a lot of that comes into play too.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the, and we'll go down on, we're going to have rabbit holes everywhere here. One of the things that I think needs to fundamentally change is people's understanding of what business is, what the purpose of business is. The purpose of business is not to make a profit. The purpose of business is to uplift the quality of life on the planet. And if your business is doing things that make living on this planet better for everything and everybody, you'll be around for a long time. But the purpose of business, I need to make a profit in order to do it, but the purpose of business is organized around uplifting the experience of being alive on this planet, for trees, for rocks, for people, for dogs, for all of that stuff. Now, that is an enormous mindset shift.
Sure.
It's an enormous mindset shift. And it moves the activity of business in the focus of business leaders away from that of being a predator in a jungle to that of being a steward of resources. And I do things differently in the jungle than I do in the temple. Very simply. And if I'm acting as a predator, that's not a healthy place sustainability-wise to actually go. This kind of goes back to the whole notion of vibration. This is an unbelievably abundant universe. There is no scarcity in the universe. There is scarcity in terms of how we distribute resources because we don't steward them well.
So, and how do you then get people to sort of shift? Because it's kind of like a paradigm shift, isn't it? To move from the idea of scarcity and the systems that are born from that to this understanding that there really is no such thing.
Well, that's my life's journey. I mean, it truly is.
Let's go right to the heart of it, right?
It requires a shift in mindset. I'll go back to that. It is a shift in mindset. Business is the most pervasive force on this planet, for ill or for good. And if we approach it if we approach business as a spiritual discipline, and I don't mean a religious discipline, but I mean if we approach business as a spiritual discipline, partly the answer to your question is, how do you approach any spiritual discipline? You approach it with reverence, you approach it with discipline, you approach it with integrity, and you approach it with developing practices that are sustainable over time. Yeah. And those are the things that you pay attention to when you're approaching business as a spiritual discipline, whether you're a consumer of a business's product or services, or whether you're actually running and delivering a business.
Wow.
It makes me think of, too, listening to everything you said, how do we actually correlate unhappy employees and engagement in employees to where you can get them all on the same belief system? Because that's working itself. Sherry, that's a $64,000 question, and that comment dates me by itself. $64,000 question. The way you do it is over time. With intentionality, with mindfulness. Gallup, the surveying organization, has done a survey for at least 20 years that I'm familiar with. I think it's probably even closer to 25. They survey employee engagement worldwide. Are people actually engaged in what they're doing, or how are they engaged? This statistic has not changed in 20 years. 87% of the workforce globally is disengaged in some way, shape, or form from the work that they do. They're emotionally disengaged. They're going through the motions. Now, that's a horrendously expensive proposition. Now, what's interesting about this is, McKinsey did a research study, the consulting firm, and they surveyed leaders and organizations about how they think they're doing. And 86% of leaders rated themselves, self-ratings, rated themselves as being inspiring and good role models. Gallup in that same year did another survey that said, tell us how your leaders are. And 82% of the respondents said that their leaders are uninspiring, fundamentally uninspiring. So there's a great gap between how people are experiencing the leaders, quote unquote, in their organizations, and the leaders themselves in terms of how they report. And this 87% disengagement is a function of leaders not understanding their role, not understanding what leadership actually is. And companies around the world spend $43 billion annually on leadership development. And that number of 87% disengaged has not moved in 25 years. $43 billion a year to move the needle hasn't moved. So part of the answer to this question, and this is a long answer to it, is we need to have leaders that understand what it means to actually lead. And leading is not an autocratic, let me tell you what to do, and you salute me and you go out and do it. Leadership is the activity of co-creating coordinated movement. That's what leadership fundamentally comes down to. Leadership causes movement. The kind of leadership that you get is really important. There's a term in software coding, and it's called elegance. Elegant code is code that has no unintended consequences. It's bug-free. Leaders that are leading well are doing things that have no unintended consequences. They don't have to go back and clean up after themselves. And far too many leaders today have to go back and clean up after themselves. They just cause mess after mess after mess, turmoil, chaos, all kinds of stuff. Co-creating coordinated movement. Co-creation is a shift of ownership. I buy into it. This is emotional transference. Coordinated movement, we're on the same page, dancing to the same music. Now, how do you do co-creation and coordinated movement? That's my life's work. I've been working in leadership development for 40 years, and that's basically what I've synthesized it down to, and that's what we focus on today.
Wow. And so, how do leaders then begin to gauge whether they're moving in the right direction?
Well, I kind of go back to that whole notion of elegance. First of all, how often do you have to clean up after yourself? Secondly, do you have people that actually have a spark in their eyes when they come to work? I mean, some of this is pretty subjective. But you can, I mean, Starbucks, I worked with Starbucks for about 5-6 years with their top leadership group. And Starbucks does not just an annual employee engagement survey, they survey their associates, their partners, they call them partners, on a regular basis around this question of engagement. And that's one of the ways that they tell, are they actually on track with this? Now, you're not going to get everybody, but if you can get a critical mass, you all of a sudden you're starting to get some traction in a healthy direction that can lend itself to thriving, not just surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a vibrational shift.
Yeah. Very huge too on that, because it makes me think of especially for somebody like you who's going into a corporation and really looking at ways to raise the morale, raise the leadership. And so how do we teach these people also the idea of love and spreading that idea of love, throughout the organization and getting them to really understand the concept of that versus negativity and the vibe that actually brings into the entire organization?
Love is a 4-letter word. A little facetious there, but love has a place in business. A very good friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Raj Sisodia. Raj was one of the co-founders of Conscious Capitalism. He wrote a book with John Mackey, who was the founder of Whole Foods, called Conscious Capitalism. And I am going to answer this question here in this way. Before Raj wrote the other book, Conscious Capitalism with John, he wrote another book that was called Firms of Endearment. I love that title. It's one of the best book titles I've ever seen. Firms of Endearment. And what he did was he looked at organizations, big organizations, mid-sized organizations that had love in some form as part of their operating value. Yeah, and it took different forms, in terms of how it was described, respect for the individual. I mean, but they operationalized it. It wasn't just fluff. It wasn't promotional material that you would put out just so that you could look good. They actually inculcated it into the culture. These firms of endearment outperformed every other company that they were measured against on a consistent basis over a 20-year period. They outperformed the S&P index. They outperformed Jim Collins's good to great companies. I mean, the single variable was that love was part of the equation. Love was part of the equation. How they took care of their people. I mean, Starbucks was in that list, and Starbucks. Everybody gets health care. It's just, it's unconscionable not to pay people a living wage. These companies pay people a living wage. Walmart did not make the list way back then. So I mean, you have to pay attention. This is where the purpose of business is to uplift the experience of being alive on this planet. If your employees are not feeling uplifted, you're going to be dead in the water. Kip Tyndall, who was the co-founder of the Container Stores, and one of the co-founders also of Conscious Capitalism. Kip's whole working ethos, and he built a container store around this, was the employees are going to be taken care of. Period. The end. Now that's my butchering of his way of saying it, but it wasn't just our employees are our greatest asset. They meant it. They put their money where their mouth was. They took care of people. And I had Kip on a show not too long ago, and we talked about a big decline that they experienced at one point in time. How they dealt with it. They didn't lay people off.
Wow.
They spread it out, and they took care of people.
That's so powerful. So how do you start then to
shift? High vibe.
High vibe, yes. How then do you start to shift a culture?
How do you shift a culture? That, and literally, that, honestly, Patty, that's what we're talking about, is shifting a culture in just about every case. You start small. It's incremental. I'm a pilot. I've flown for years, and the control surfaces, the aileron and the rudders and that sort of stuff are big control surfaces, and they make big movements. But they also have a trim tab, just a little tiny piece that if you when I'm at cruise altitude, I'll just set the trim tab, and I don't have to do much, just a little, and it controls everything. You do something small in a culture and you hold it, and it acts like a trim tab. And then you start building on it. You start working with it. You start expanding it a bit. When I was doing work with Nokia back in the late 1990s, I led a major chunk of their leadership development initiative for 12 years as an external consultant. Every single meeting we ever had in that company at that time began with a conversation around the 4 operational values in the company. And every decision that we were making in that leadership function was run through the filter of how does it impact, or how is it impacted by these 4 values. Mm-hmm. And this kind of goes full circle back to how do you keep the spirit of the company alive, the soul of the business alive. You have to keep your eye on that ball. You have to keep the conversations viable. And that's how the culture starts to get tweaked.
Well, it makes me think, how do you measure the environment of the culture to begin this process, to begin how to use the language that you're teaching in a certain way if let's say the environment is really low? Mm-hmm. And you want to create a big shift, but you're going to have to bring up various what do I want to say, vibes of different people, frequencies of different people.
Yeah, well, in starting with some measurement is usually a good. You can kind of get a baseline in place, and there are a lot of instruments, psychometric instruments that can be used, assessment instruments that can be used to do that. And I could give you a laundry list of ones that I've used, but you want to find, particularly if you're looking to move a culture, you start with some surveying. It may not be the entire organization; it may just be a pocket. And if you can get something shifted in that pocket, then you can start leveraging that out. But that's part of the difficulty that leaders have in organizations is they take too big a bite when they try to take a change. Here's the thing with change. The difficulty that people run into with change is never the change itself. The difficulty with change is the disruption to existing relationships that the change causes. People get comfortable, even with maladapted procedures, things that aren't working well, they get comfortable with them. And even if it's not working, I'm comfortable with it. So if you ask me to change something, all of a sudden, it's kind of, who am I and where do I belong? These are 2 questions that get challenged. And even if it wasn't working, at least I knew what it was. And you're asking me now to do something that I'm not familiar with. I don't have a relationship with it where I feel comfortable. And because it feels uncomfortable, I'm probably going to push it back. So I want to as a leader, pay attention to those relational dynamics. Far too often, what business leaders will find themselves doing, managers, and we do this at home too. We will make the business case for why this change is a good idea. Here's why this is a good idea. Here's the benefit. And we tell people what the benefit is, but none of that addresses their relationship with what's changing. Mm-hmm. So the business case, we rely on the business case to carry the day, and logically it should. Communication is not a logical process when you apply it to human beings. Communication is a biological process. And that's what you're working with is, the biology of meaning. What does this mean to me? And if that meaning behavior is always in alignment with the meaning that people are making up about what's going on around them. Mm-hmm. Very rarely will people behave in ways that are intentionally out of integrity with the meaning that they've made up. That's why people, it feels right. And most people would rather be right than get what they say they want. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, just about everybody would rather be right than get what they say they want. This is the right way to do this, even if it's not working. So I'm going to hang on to it.
So how then can businesses help foster change and make it easier for people?
Again, I kind of go back to conversation on this. Questions invite participation. So rather than dictating and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is where we're going to go, and I've got no problem with saying this is the direction we need to be going. But what I want to follow that on with was a question, or two or three. If we're successful at doing this, whatever this is, what would that make possible for you that you wouldn't get to have, do, or be if we weren't doing that? Mm-hmm. And they may go, well, I don't have a clue. I'm going, well, I'd like you to think about that for a little bit. Yeah. What would you get to do, have, or be if we're successful with this initiative at your level? What would that mean for you? And they will come up with something. And then you can work with that. Questions invite participation. So you have to become masterful at asking high quality questions.
And I love that you think about so directly based on a lot of my training, Mary Morris and Bob Proctor, is the quality questions you ask yourself determines the kind of life you live.
Absolutely.
Huge.
Yeah. So that kind of goes back to a question that you had earlier, I think, Patty, about maybe it was either one of you, I'm not sure which one, around where does love belong?
Oh yeah.
Where does love belong? Yeah. One of the questions is, what would you love to be doing? You're working here. I know what your job is. I know what your job description is. What would you love to be doing? And people will come up with that, with an answer to that.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really incredible. Just the idea of actually engaging the employees and trying to create that environment is I think rare though in the business world.
It is.
And so, for someone who say, has been in the classic environment and maybe, they're starting their own business and making, a transition out of the 9 to 5, because that's happening for a lot of people right now. Yeah. How can they take some of these new ideas and start to incorporate them, just kind of like from the ground up?
Well, I'll also say, I guess I'll default to that initial, what would I love to do question. That would be a place for me to start. What would I love to do? And pay attention to, the frequency. What resonates with me? And then I start finding ways to leverage that. What would I love to do? And the key here is I need to keep myself in motion. I need to plant the seed and then keep myself in motion. And it doesn't have to be big motions, just something small every day that moves me closer to the realization of that. And it starts to expand it. One thing to keep in mind, I think, and this is directly out of Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, some of these guys, the only thing that I have control over in my life is my thoughts, my feelings, my attitude, and my behavior. Those are the only 4 things I have. My thoughts, my attitudes, my feelings, and my behavior. Those are the only 4 things I ever have control over. So if I start feeling anxious about the future, I'm thinking I have control over what's going on outside of me. Coming back into those, the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, those I have control over. And, the Buddhists have got this phrase, equanimity, and it's a consequence of, just kind of slowing down the monkey mind, getting this a stable sense of equilibrium internally. That's where I am most resourceful. Mm-hmm. I can't do anything about what's going on out there right now. The wildfires, the smoke, none of this stuff can I specifically do anything about that immediately, but I can control how I think about it, how I feel about it, and the actions I take in regards to it. And that's where that sense of control actually can serve me. That's really the only point I have control.
So true. And it makes me think too that if we could bring so much more of this awareness around the creative mindset, around the understanding and the awareness that we truly do create our own reality. And so much of these illusions are showing up in our present moment because of how we're being in ourselves, what we're putting out in ourselves, and then being able to really, truly help people understand it's what you're attached to in the moment that is the cause or the effect of what's showing up.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Sherry. Yeah, my external world is a manifestation of an internal state of being. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the world today. I don't have much, I'm not perturbed much by it. My internal world is actually fairly calm. Even in the face of, I mean, yeah, I go, yeah, my, my business now in the last 40 years, I've got over 5 million miles in the air. This is the longest stretch of time in my adult life that I have not been on an airplane going to a client to work. It's the longest stretch of time I've slept in the same bed, which I'm actually enjoying it. And I mentioned that for this reason. My business activities, China, Japan, Africa, Europe, South America. I mean, this is where I do business as well as here in the U.S. Everything collapsed. It disappeared in February. It literally disappeared. And I could have gone to, oh my God, the world is just come to an end. And that sense of where do I actually have control is where I went to. And this 4-month, 5-month period has been the most creative, the most productive, the most exhilarating, and the most exciting, and actually one of the best times of my life in the last 40 years. It really has. I got a new book out. We've got new programs coming out. We've got stuff coming up online. I mean, we were able to, pivot. I hate that word, but that's basically what we did. Because people they pivot and they start going in circles. You don't want to go in circles. You got to pivot towards something. Yeah. So we've been able to really transition in a very healthy way. And that hasn't meant that there hasn't been perturbation. There has been upset. There has been, loss of revenue and all that kind of stuff. And nobody took my birthday away. I'm still breathing. I'm still here. And the obstacle is the way. So when the obstacle shows up, it's just pointing me to a new direction to get to where I say I want to go. The obstacle becomes the way. That big boulder isn't something to go, oh my God, this is horrible. It's something to go, hey, far out. Let's go on an exploration, see where we end up. That's a different mindset than most people have.
Well, and to that point, how important do you think coaches are in helping us make those transitions?
I have had I've personally had coaches, oh, good Lord. Almost 40 years now in some way, shape, or form. Some have been with me for a long period of time. I've got a couple of them that I've worked with for 25 years. In various modalities and different ways. When stuff comes up, they're kind of specialized in some different areas. My eyes look out, my ears hear things out there. My coach sees things that I don't see. Mm-hmm. They can point things in a way, they can point out things in a way that take on new meaning. And it's that new meaning that generates different options, different possibilities. So I'm biased, obviously, because coaching is what I do. A large part of my business is organized around executive coaching. But I wouldn't be where I am today without a coach. Absolutely would not be where I am today without a coach. Every professional athlete has a coach. Every professional athlete has a coach. So why wouldn't a business person, why wouldn't a regular person have somebody that they can trust, confide in, that can actually be straight with them and point out where there's a possibility that they had not seen? That's invaluable as far as I can tell.
I totally agree, because just as yourself, I'm the woman I am today because of training with Michael Beckwith and then Bob Proctor, Mary Morrissey, my spiritual mind teacher that I've had for 20 years. And one of the things that she's always done is she's helped me to be accountable in the moment, to really embrace the moment, to look at my perception in the moment. And not even only that, but where am I being compassionate in the moment? Where am I understanding the meaning of compassion? And how can I spread that just by being that in myself first? Yeah.
It starts here first. It absolutely does, Sherry. Yeah, it's spot on. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have a podcast, and I snuck in some listens on your podcast more so recently because you posted one with my good friends Lynn Kitchen and Julie Hamilton on their, world's greatest motivators, and I was like laughing and saying, "Wow, this is really all about the high vibe."
Yeah, it's just been fun. I started doing it just because, the idea of the soul of business. I wanted to find ways to bring more information to people about what that's about and why it's important from my perspective. So the podcast is called The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett, and I've got, I think, 50 some episodes up now, something like that. But we just went, we were just asked to join the C-Suite Network radio structure, which gives a much broader audience than what I've been having with it. But it's fun. I mean, I do a couple of interviews a week, and great folks. I mean, I've had John Mackey on. We've got stuff coming up with Raj and Lynn Twist. Just to name drop a little, but also I had Mark Victor Hansen on the other day. Just some fascinating people, and I'm fortunate enough to have access to some interesting people. And then my good friend and partner David Meltzer and I do a show on a weekly basis, Office Hours, The Soul of Business.
I watched it. I liked it.
Yeah, we had Les Brown on the other day. And we had Dr. Gladys Martin, who was she basically originated the GPS that we use on our phones. She's 90 years old. She's truly a hidden figure. She was a hoot. And so just to be able to have these conversations, relationships live in conversation. And when I'm having conversations, I'm learning things, just, like with you two. I love these conversations. They're enlightening for me, but I also get an opportunity to bring hopefully some value to folks that listen to these conversations. Well, and that's the idea behind the soul of business. Yeah.
That's why we do it too. That's why listening to yours, it made me think of relationships, just like what you just described, and finding out about different people and what they're doing to raise their vibe and what they're doing to shift their mindset. And even like David Meltzer, I'm from LA.
Okay.
Of course, I'm from the pro bodybuilding world. So remember, he had Sports One Marketing.
Yes, Sports One Marketing. Yeah. I've known David for years. Actually, he co-authored a Compassionate Capitalism with me. He's a very good friend, and I love the guy. I mean, great business partner.
Greatest motivators as well.
Yeah. The world's greatest motivators. That's that included Les and John Asroff. I mean, there's a whole bunch of folks. Mary Morrissey was on there. Bob Proctor was on there. I was in honored company, to be able to be on that stage with them. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, that's amazing. And you have several other books out as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Got 5 books. Compassionate Capitalism, which is over my right shoulder here if people are watching. That was a #1 bestseller in 4 countries when it came out. It was one of the fastest selling books that Amazon ever had. It was, David and I were pretty proud about that. This one on my left shoulder is actually my newest book. It's called The Leadership Mindset. Not The Leadership Mindset, The Leadership Mindset Weekly. And it's basically 52 weekly practices that are designed specifically to change a leader's mindset to the kind of mindset that we've been talking about. And, we built a mastermind around it. And, so, we do a deep dive into these practices in this mastermind. And the mastermind's a year-long mastermind. It's not for the faint of heart. You gotta want to shift to do this, and it takes time. But it's really solidly built. I love the program. I love the book. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I myself am a mastermind, and the value that the mastermind has brought to the show, aligning with the people at that higher level who fully support each other, who want to see each other win, and just one of my mastermind friends, he just literally gave me an entire whole layout, the steps to success. Yeah. He said, it's yours. And he just started spitting it off. Like he said, I just want to give. I just want wherever I can serve.
Yep. That's the power of a mastermind. When my wife died 10 years ago, one of the things that actually helped me move through the grieving process was a mastermind that I got involved in. And it wasn't a grieving group. It was actually a mastermind group that was designed specifically to, and I made a distinction here between moving on and moving forward. I didn't want to move on. There was too much good to leave behind, and moving on implied leaving a bunch of stuff behind. But moving forward, there was a lot there. What am I moving forward to? And this is where the mastermind actually came into play for me. And it was invaluable in moving through grief fairly quickly. Not too quickly, but appropriately. And I landed on my feet, and things opened up, and possibility. This is when Cynthia and I got together was shortly after that. My wife, Cynthia Kersey, moving forward. I always want to be moving forward, and masterminds are designed to help me move forward, whatever it is that I'm trying to move towards. How do I move forward in that regard, in pursuit of that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Love that. So can you tell us a little bit about, just give us a sneak peek at some of those, tidbits from the 52 weeks?
Yeah. This wasn't teed up, but I do have the book right here. It's organized around different sayings, I guess would be one thing, but practices, really specifically around practices. For example, here, the book is broken into 5 major sections, which is co-creating coordinated movement. There's 5 elements that kind of comprise that: awareness, context definition, communication mastery, commitment, and trust. So within each one of those 5 domains, we have practices. And over that 12-month period, we'll take a deep dive into them. So let's see here.
I put you on the spot.
One of them here it's actually a quotation from Jeff Bezos. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So that's kind of the catalyst. And then the week, and people will spend a week in their mastermind exploring what that question means for them, or what that saying actually implies for them as a leader. So in this case, people tell stories. As a matter of fact, meaning is created and communicated solely through the use of stories. Customers judge companies primarily based on how they perform relative to their promise, their brand promise. So either as an individual or as a company, what's my brand promise? How are we delivering on that? As a leader, how am I keeping that connection to that brand promise with my employees and with my customers? So and there's a whole week spent exclusively on that particular piece within the framework of a larger domain. But the mastermind, hold your feet to the fire, give you some ideas, you play with it, you work with it. And then the next week we'll come together, and it's organized on a weekly basis. We'll have a mastermind, just a general mastermind session on Monday mornings. And then we've got groups around the world here. People will break into their mastermind groups, and that's their cohort, their mastermind group for that week. And we're changing it up a little bit, so it's not the same people all the time, because we get different eyes on it, we get different perspectives, we get different ideas as a consequence of that. So I'm really excited with how it's working.
Wow, that's so unique and different, because I've been part of a lot of mastermind groups as well, even with our core group with Julie and Lynn and all that over the years. And it's and just the value that comes along. But these new things that you shared, I haven't experienced in a mastermind group before.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of masterminds, but number one, I wanted to make this accessible to as many people as I possibly could. So we priced it just crazy. I mean, it's $197 a month. It's just it costs nothing, relatively, to what other mastermind groups are priced at. But I wanted to have pollination, just a lot of germination of ideas. And I've been in enough mastermind groups myself to know that things can start to go a little bit stale sometimes, even with new content focus, because people get kind of familiar with your story. They get familiar with your stuff. So it's kind of like, no, let's mix this up, mix and match, and see what we can create out of it. And it's starting to really be interesting. Yeah, We launched it a couple of months ago, and people can get into it at any point in time. There's no beginning and no, you don't have to have something beforehand to jump in where you're at right now.
And is that your mastermind group that I just put up on the screen?
Actually, the better one to go to, I'm gonna, we just redid the website, so the URL changed. www.learn.blainebartlett.com.
Well, and I love this idea of, having a weekly focus, because I, again, agree. I have been in masterminds and have never seen that done, but what an easy way to kind of move through something systematically and get through it all in 1 year.
Yeah, and it takes a year, and that's actually Bartlett. There's a T missing between the R and the L.
Good old Gary here trying to
spell check going here. I wanted to do it over a year, and I wanted to have it variable enough, and so that we keep interest going, and some stuff will be relevant, some stuff won't, but all of it will over time be relevant to what you're doing as a leader in your life or a leader in your business. And that's what.
Well, and I love it because change is gradual, right? So it can give people the opportunity to sort of process without that feeling of, oh, I have all this stuff that I need to change all at once.
You take off too big a bite and nothing's going to change. So this goes back to that whole trim tab notion. I want to get some small things in motion. Small changes incrementally aggregated over time cause huge change. Hey, there we go. That's the right one.
I'm close. So it was. I'm like, oh my God. Let me
that works.
Had to make sure you got it. So, one of the things that has really stood out for me during this whole interview with you tonight has been the vibration of joy you put out, the whole vibe on your face of this bright smile and this feeling of good. What does joy mean to you?
I love that question. It's there's a distinction between happiness and joy. Okay. Joy is, for me, joy is connection to soul and spirit. I mean, it really is. It's that experience of being connected. I watch a sunset and I feel joyful. It's just this, there's the awe of the magic of this thing. I was meditating the other night, and just on the notion of uniqueness. You, Sherry, you, Pam, me, we are all extraordinarily unique. There is nobody that will ever breathe in the same way that we do. There is nobody that will ever smell the same smells in the same way that we smell them, or see a sunset in the same way that we see a sunset, or be moved by music in the same way that we're moved. We are unique. And what's interesting about that, in that uniqueness, we are exquisitely alone. We are extraordinarily alone. Because nobody can ever know me fully in the way that I know me. And so part of the inward journey is getting to know me as best I possibly can. I have to fall in love with me. And that's the pursuit of happiness. And happiness is born from inside out. I'm happy with me. Joy is the consequence of being connected to the other and actually be in awe of the uniqueness of other things that I find myself connected to. And the human being, and I think this is true of just spirit and soul in general, it seeks connection. It seeks connection because being alone is not a good place to be. Being alone isn't a good place to be. So I look for connection. So connecting with the sunset, I've got a fountain out on the deck here, and I've got birds that are splashing out in it right now. So connecting to the joy that they feel, the joy that I feel watching them splash in the water. It's kind of like, okay, I didn't put that fountain up there to be a bird bath, but I love that it's a bird bath.
Right.
I've got to go change the water every couple of days, but love that they're using it for that. They're connected to that in a way that they wouldn't be, and it's a unique connection. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the power of being the power of being human is the power of being able to bring joy in the experience of life. Being in the slums of Calcutta, I can be joyful. Mm-hmm. The simplest of things, and this I go full circle back to being on the farm, walking out of the field and seeing the first emergence of something in spring when the snow is melted. And it's kind of like, wow. It just, the joy of that connection, of the celebration of that uniqueness. That blade of grass is unique. Nothing will ever mimic it. Others might look like it, but nothing will ever mimic it. And that uniqueness is to be celebrated and actually leveraged.
Wow. Thank you for connecting us. Wow.
Yes.
I felt that the whole time that you were speaking. And literally when you went to each example, I could actually see the example in my head, the connection you were bringing to all of us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so profound. Thank you.
Yeah. It's so, my gosh, we've gotten through this hour so fast and so quick. So I have everything on this screen that Gail gave me. So where do you want to start?
What's that? I don't know what Gail gave me.
We have your website.
Yep.
So that's blainebartlett.com.
Yep.
And then we have your Facebook page, which is facebook.com official Blaine Bartlett. And then we have your LinkedIn page, which is Blaine Bartlett. We have your Twitter page, Blaine Bartlett.
I'm everywhere.
I was going to say, covering the territory.
Yeah. And then we have your YouTube page, which is user/Blaine Bartlett 1.
Yeah.
And then we have your Instagram page, which is, you took us off track.
Didn't have enough room for it. Blaine Bartlett is on there too.
Okay, well, you know what? She must have missed that one. So we'll
it's Blaine
that
Bartlett.
in our show notes. We'll make sure that's perfect in the show notes. And then, of course, we have the very last Mastermind one. And
Nope, that's the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. That's the right one.
That's the right one. There you go. Hey, you're doing tech support really well here.
Heck yeah, well, thanks for the support. I just appreciate the high vibe.
That's perfect.
Well, it's all about fun, and that's what the High Vibe Show is about. It's about being ourselves, having fun, connecting amazing people like you to our audience, and really lifting the planet. Just like what we say in our show intro, it's raising the vibe of the planet, and we're contributing in that way as well. So thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Anytime. I've had a ball with this. I love this. What you're up to. I love the mission of what you're doing. So any way I can continue to support it, absolutely don't hesitate to let me know.
Oh, well, we appreciate it. We're going to don't say that unless you mean it.
I mean it. I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it.
Okay, because
we will take you up on that.
All right, well, thank you so much. All right, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience and our podcast how they can reach us?
Of course, you can find us on the web at thehighvibenation.com. You can also find us on Facebook at The High Vibe Nation, and as always on Instagram at The High Vibe Nation.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here as usual. We appreciate each and every one of our audience members. We thank you for sharing this out. We're available on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And until next week, have an amazing rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.
From everybody here at the High Vibe Nation, we want to say thank you for choosing to raise your vibration. And of course, please like, share, and subscribe. If you need to find us on the web, check us out at www.thehighvibenation.com. Looking forward to seeing you on the next episode, and keep high vibing.